Hello everyone. Today is Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022. I'm Crystal Dawn Hill, and I'm here today to present to you part one of my video, The Influence of the Stars Along My Journey with My Divine Masculine. I really wanted to appear on camera today and have a really nice atmosphere in which to present this video to you, but I wasn't up to it. Time didn't allow, energy didn't allow, but I'm still feeling a great sense of urgency to get this message out. So instead of me being on camera, I wrote out the bullet points on my blackboard, and you're going to be looking at that instead while I present this to you. So, as I said in the introduction, this video is going to be more structured than I normally do videos. Normally when I do a video, I feel very inspired on the spur of the moment, and I kind of do it on the fly and just present the information or the intuition or whatever, going by my feelings and not planning it out. But this is really important to me, and I feel like it's very significant information, and so I wanted to do an outline and make sure that I don't leave anything out that's important. So as you can see on the screen, I have written out 10 bullet points in reference to how the stars have been very significant along my journey. And so that part of it is very structured, whereas how I break each bullet point down will be a little bit more intuitive and going by my own guidance and how I feel I should talk about each point. So I'm going to start with number one, which is seeing the grid. So this point is in reference to the very beginning of my spiritual journey. I had just ended my second marriage, which came shortly after my initial awakening in around the year 2000 or 2001. And I was in between my living arrangements with my husband and getting my own place, and I was staying with my mom and my brother. And I had driven one evening to a very important spot. It was the entrance to a subdivision where we lived when I was a child. And this subdivision was always very significant for me. It was very enchanted, and it held a lot of sacred energy in reference to my journey. So because I had just left my husband and I was living in the household with my mom and my brother, I was doing a lot of reflecting back along the past different periods of my life, and if their energy was not conducive with where I was on my journey, and so I wanted to get out and have some time on my own. So it was a very clear starlit night, and I was sitting by the lake, which is at the entrance of the subdivision, and I looked up at the sky, and I happened to notice that I could see very faint lines connecting the stars. And I'm not a very good artist, but as you can see on the first 5 bullet points, I've drawn little illustrations to represent the point that I'm discussing. So even though my drawing is at a very elementary level, hopefully you can see on camera that there are lines that I've drawn connecting the stars, and that's very much what I saw that night. And I had never seen this before, and I had never heard anyone talking about it. So when I got home, my mom and my brother were still awake, and I asked them, had they ever heard of this or have seen it themselves? And they hadn't, and they acted as though they thought that I was seeing things, but I wasn't. I literally saw lines of light connecting the stars. So when I found out that they had never heard of this, I felt like I had seen it through my intuitive vision or my third eye rather than my visual eyes. So that experience sparked new awarenesses for me, and it caused me to be more aware of the subtleties that surround us that we may not see going about our day-to-day life. So number 2 actually did not happen in chronological order in reference to number 1. It actually happened a few years before. I hadn't even gotten into a relationship with my husband at that point, my second husband. I was out in the country visiting with a friend of mine, and when she lived atop a very high mountain, and on my way home back into town, I saw a shooting star, and I was so excited when we didn't have cell phones back then. So when I got home, I called her and I told her I was so happy because I knew that shooting star was a sign for me. I had never seen a shooting star before, and I knew that it was the heavens indicating to me that I was going to find true love along my life journey. And I think that I was talking to my second husband by then, and there was a relationship pending, so to speak, but when I saw the shooting star that night, I didn't really intuit who it was about. I just knew that I had true love written in my stars, and that it was a very good and positive sign for me. Number 3, the stars guide me. Now, there's about 3 or 4 different things that I could say about this. I can say that in general, I've always felt like the stars were guiding me. I've always enjoyed going out in the night air and looking up at the sky, especially during the winter when the air is very crisp and there's not a lot of humidity in the air, and the star systems are very visible. And I've always enjoyed that and always felt like the stars were kind of speaking to me. And then there's more specific things that I can say, such as shortly after my dad passed away, I started noticing this one star seemed to always be following me in the early morning hours before daylight, when I would be going to work very early in the morning, or at night if I was out late. I could look up and it just always seemed to be this one star kind of watching over me, and it felt like my dad. And the reason for that is that when he was living and he would show up to visit me spontaneously, I would always see this little twinkle in his eye. And I noticed this most of all when I would be at work, and I was working at customer service, and I would just happen to look in a particular direction of the store, and there he'd be standing smiling at me, and his eyes would be twinkling. And I guess I couldn't see his eyes twinkling from that far away because it might have been 20 or 30 feet away from me, but I could feel it in his smile and in his heart. So we had a very close bond. And so I always just felt like, ever since he passed in 2003, I always felt like he was watching over me and guiding me, and that he would kind of not be the actual one who guided me to my true love, but I felt like at times he was kind of working in conjunction with God and maybe putting in a good word for me. I know that sounds, cliche or a little novel, but that's just how it felt. Number 4, the stars speaking to me. This kind of ties in with number 3. I really have felt at times like they were speaking to me. And I didn't think to add this point, but I just want to put in here right now because it just popped in my mind. Shortly after I lost my vision, which happened in 2017, a friend of mine invited me to go to her mom's home on a lake, an hour or so away from where we live. And when we got out of the car that night, when we arrived, she talked about how beautiful the stars were. And I looked up and I couldn't see them. And that was the first time I had been made aware that I couldn't see the stars anymore. And I broke down because I was so sad, because they have been such a significant, point in my journey. And at that particular time, I felt a little hopeless that I would ever be able to see the stars again. But something down deep inside of me told me not to be concerned about it, because I would one day be able to see them again. And this brings me to another point that I had forgotten to highlight. And that will tie in more with something that I want to talk about in part 2. So I'll just make a note that I want to add that in there in part 2. And I'll make a reference to this topic right here so that there'll be a reference point to illustrate what I'm referring to. But going back to the way the stars have spoken to me over the years, I guess I've already covered a couple of those points, like the shooting star and the lines that connect the stars. But there's so much more that really, it would take so much more time and thought for me to cover every single incident of when I felt this taking place. Number 5, connection with the stars. And I'm not sure how clear my little drawing is, but it's a stick man below and then a star above with a beam of light connecting them. And the reason that I wanted to add this point is because it's something that I mentioned in a later point, but I just want to touch on it here. I'm sure that some people will resonate with this concept, and to some it might sound very foreign or bizarre. But for those of us who identify with a certain star system, or that feel of familiarity or a sense of kinship with the stars, will certainly understand what I'm saying here. And that is that we ourselves are made up of the same stuff that stars are made of. And for some, we believe that our soul is actually a star. So if you would take down our physical body our human consciousness, our personality, our lifetimes, our history, and the only thing that you could see was our soul, it would resemble the light of a star. And that's basically what I wanted to point out in this particular point. But I also believe that we have a connection with the stars. I know a lot of Aborigines and Native peoples believe that we are from the stars, and that even though we're here in human bodies, that we still have a relationship with the stars. And I believe that as well. And I would even go so far as to say that if beings from other star systems could look upon the Earth and get a sense of there being life here, they would get a feeling that whatever that life form is would be alive. And I think that's because of the light that our souls emit that radiates out into the cosmos and into the universe. I also believe that those of us on the spiritual journey, or even the twin flame journey, who understand what it feels like to have connections with others, humans, other people who are here. I also believe that the light within one person and the light within another person are connected. And I would like to share a little story about that real quickly. I've talked about this in numerous places, in groups, on my page, on my personal wall, and I've shared this story with people on one-on-one conversations as well. I won't go into detail here, but just for the sake of explaining what I mean by that, I once had this experience where I saw two celebrities on television performing a song together, and they each were married to other people, but I could literally see a beam of light connecting them at their foreheads. And my mom and I were watching this show together, and I asked her if she saw that, and she didn't. And I knew that I must have seen something divine, because I literally saw it with my physical eyes. And I told her one day they were going to be together, and she's like, but they're both happily married to other people. And I'm like, I can't help it. I just know that they're going to be together because I saw their souls being connected with that beam of light. And about 3 years later, they each got divorced and ended up together, and they've been happily married ever since for the past, I guess it was 20 years. So that's what I mean by the connection, that I think that each star represents us, or vice versa, and that we have a connection with the stars, but we also have connections with each other through our soul, which, as I said, I believe is made up of the same stuff that stars are made up. Number 6, and remember, I do have poor vision, and I'm sitting quite a few feet away from my blackboard, so I'm straining a little bit to see these bullet points. Okay, number 6, corresponding post. Now, the reason I put post in quotation marks is because it isn't a literal post. It's a point of space in, like, geographically, it's a point in space. So the subdivision that I mentioned earlier The entrance where I drove that night and saw the grid with my visual eyes, um, I believe that is a portal or a post where my energy and my divine masculine's energy is captured. And there's a specific reason why I feel that way that I won't go into here, but just for the sake of briefly explaining what I'm saying, is his energy and my energy have both been present in that particular spot, and I believe our energy is captured there, and it's in a portal that is there's no time, like the 0 point, because anytime that I feel like I need to tune in with his energy, anytime that I feel like we are going to astral travel together, anytime that I feel like I need to tap in to our collective consciousness, I often get a vision of being in that particular area and I also believe that the night that I drove there and felt this connection with the stars, I believe it was because I was in that portal or that vortex of energy, where our energy reside together as a unit. And I believe that every pair of twins has such a place where they go to enter and exit in and out of the cosmos, like an opening in the sky, to where it's like a doorway, that we can travel in and out of dimensions, timelines, to each other, and so forth. I don't think that's necessary, but I think that when we can find such a place, that it makes astral traveling with each other more easily accessible. And there's probably a lot more I could say about that too. I feel like my guides are telling me to not speak about that any further. However, I do feel like there'll be questions about it. So if anyone has any questions or comments or needs clarity about that, please feel free to reach out. Number 7. I nicknamed my divine masculine my star. When I first saw his picture and I meditated on who he was, and I prayed and asked God who he was, I got a sense that he's literally that star that I'm connected to, my main connection. And over time, as our consciousness began to merge more and more, and all of these different points that I've discussed so far, and the ones that I have not yet discussed, all came flooding back to me and showed me that he is my star. And of course, by star, I mean celestial star and not celebrity type star, which in my perspective, he could qualify as a celebrity in my book. But it's not really me putting him on a pedestal, but just, the admiration that I feel for him and the respect. And he makes himself just so much out of reach that it keeps me having that yearning and desire to communicate with him. So, this Christmas I also got a teddy bear, and the teddy bear is wearing light blue and sparklies on his sweater, and I wanted to put star in his name, and I meditated on that and decided to call him Starlight. And shortly thereafter, I discovered, I should say, I rediscovered Adam Lambert and found out that Adam has a song called Starlight. So I thought that was pretty cool. Number 8, I renamed my brand Twin Star. I had previously created my website as Twin Flames Enterprises, and I had to dissolve my business when I became visually impaired and became disabled. But I changed my YouTube channel and my Facebook page to Twin Star Enterprises. So that isn't technically a website or a business, but I wanted to call it Twin Star because I feel like that's what my Divine Masculine and I are, is twin stars. And you know, it's so interesting. After I did that, I found out that there's actually a celestial phenomenon. I forgot the name of it, but it's 2 stars that are sort of they move in conjunction with one another. So I thought that was really interesting as well. Number 9, visions of a portal. That goes back to that grid point or that post that I was talking about previously. I pretty much covered everything I wanted to say about that. I just listed it as a bullet point so I wouldn't forget to mention it. But I've had visions of that particular spot and even imagined that it is like the coordinates that